Hey, so today just gonna do a little review of the Manitou Mezzer Pro Forks. First of all, I'm a sponsored writer for Manitou through the Wideopenmag team, so um, just gonna get that out of the way. I'm not paid to say this particular video. This is just a video that I'm doing. This is all my honest opinions, and just gonna give you a bit of a review. So, like, for starters, I'm not not particularly good at like working on my bike or things like that. And I've always used one of the two main brands of forks before, and I always knew how to work on those because they were like dead simple. So I was quite nervous about getting a new set of forks to use, because you go to races and it's maybe a little bit more difficult to get spares or something like that, because there's always support from the two main suspension brands there. So that was like some of my reservations, and also like people just don't use it that much, so you just don't necessarily hear a lot of good stuff, and you don't hear a lot of bad stuff either, but there's not all that like confirmation that you're kind of looking for with a brand new set of forks. So when I found out I was going to be running the Manitou forks this year, I was nervous, to say the least. That's for sure. So anyway, about February, early March time, I got the set of them and I put them onto my bike. And by this point, I'd like read a few of the online reviews that some of the magazines had done on the forks, and they all seemed like really good. But I had like a bit of a reservation because there's a lot of dials on it basically, and for me personally, the less dials the better, because I just don't want to think about my suspension. I just kind of want it to work. So I was used to having a lot less input into my suspension, but I got the forks and I put them on my bike and I pumped them up to the weight category. I just couldn't really be bothered to work out what the PSI should be for my weight, so I just picked the one that was like closest to my weight, which was 4 or 5 kilos heavier than me. And I sort of figured, given that it's probably aimed at more of an average rider, that a little bit stiffer wouldn't be a bad thing. And I just set all the dials to literally everything they said in the manual, which usually I would say, like, don't bother doing that, because what they tell you is like a load of rubbish. It like only works for like someone who's like a beginner, right, or like the average rider with the forks, but I don't really think anyone's the average rider with the forks. So like I just thought it was useless on other fork brands, but it really worked for the Manitou forks, because when I went out riding, like, I basically didn't adjust any dials. I think I turned the rebound one click to be a bit faster, but that was it. The forks have just been like, I haven't touched them at all, and that's on my Mega, which I have the forks at full 180mm travel, and on my Reactor, which I have at 150mm travel. So I literally just pumped them up to the settings that they said, turned the dials to the settings that they said, went out riding, and then only made the rebound one click faster on both forks actually. The Reactor was a bit more difficult to get used to, because I haven't used forks less than 160 for ages, like 6 years probably, and except on a jump bike, of course. And it was just a whole different bike. I've used the Mega for a long time now, so I was just used to how that bike was going to react. But on my nuke-proof Reactor, once I got the shock dialed in, the forks felt absolutely fine. I wasn't. It was more the rear shock was making me feel weird about the forks than anything, and that was just me being a weirdo. So like, I was like initially concerned about the maintenance of these forks, and I've used the forks on my Mega for since early March now, and to be honest, I haven't serviced them. And then I got my the ones for the reactor, and I all of a sudden put them on and thought, oh, maybe the ones on my Mega need a service, because the ones on the reactor like felt really good. But then, because they had that like new fork feel. But I had to go. My friend just jumped on my Mega and was like, "Whoa, your forks feel like really good." And I was like, it must just be the new fork feel on the reactor, which only lasts like a ride, and then their forks just feel good. Because like I've had no complaints with the Mezzer Pros on my Mega at all. I just got excited by the new fork feeling. So how have they been riding wise compared to, so in the past, for the last forever, I've only ever had RockShox Lyrics or Pikes. That's the only fork I've ever used, basically. And I actually had someone message me on Instagram from a clip from a race last year or the year before, asking me what my fork settings were, because they looked terrible. And I was like, my fork settings are fine. I'm riding the best I've ever rode, like doing the best results I've ever done. But then I always did feel like the front end was diving a lot on my old forks. And then on the Manitou, like I almost had to like readjust my whole riding, because finally my forks weren't diving on steep corners. I used to have this like perpetual fear of like steep corners, which I basically don't really have anymore, because the fork has so much more support where you need it. Basically, you're not just like deep in the travel on these like steep, compression type corners, that you really want your fork to be like in the middle of its travel, holding you up, as opposed to like all the way down, giving you a much steeper head angle. So they've been really good for that. And they've got like amazing small bump sensitivity. I've been really impressed with that. I haven't rode the roughest trails yet or anything mental, but like what I have been riding is my all my local trails, and I've not had to think about my forks even once. They just work. And like, I was skeptical about them as well, and my friends that I ride with, they quite like to say, are you just saying this because they gave you the set of forks? And it's like, I don't know how to communicate. Like, they're actually just good. They're just a good set of forks that cost a lot less than your top spec Fox or your top spec RockShox. Because I think the top spec Fox retails for like $1,200, and you can pick up a set of Manitous on the internet for £600-700 brand new. It's an absolute bargain for a top spec fork. So that's about that for that. In terms of the maintenance, I haven't yet tackled that myself. It's probably not something I'll actually ever bother to tackle myself, because whenever I do my own mechanics, it's just never quite as good as when a proper mechanic does it, really. But I did get my forks on my nuke-proof reactor lowered from 180 to 150. So in the box it comes with the little spacer things that you need to reduce the travel, and took it down to the mechanic's place, and he stripped the forks apart relatively easily. It's an internal job. It's never going to be the simplest job, but it wasn't too bad. And we popped in the spacers and then just put the forks back together. The forks are definitely like a little bit more of a hassle to take apart. You can't just undo a couple of 6mm bolts, whack it with a hammer, and then pull the lowers off. You need a few more tools, which is probably not my favorite thing, but I can live with it, because I never work on my bike, and I pay for all my mechanic work. I pay for it. I don't get any freebies. I just believe in having a professional to do a better job than I will. So yeah, in terms of maintenance of the forks, it's probably a job that's a bit easier to get a mechanic to do. But I mean, it didn't look too difficult. You just needed the right tools basically, and I just like to not have any faff, so it was just much easier to have a mechanic do it. Trying to think what else there is left to talk about the forks. Not a whole lot really else. They've just been great, and I'm excited to try them out on, you know, world enduro races and British national races, and see how they fare. But you know, I've given them a test on big jumps, rough tracks, steep tracks, flat tracks, and they've just performed without any issues. I never have to think about them. And I think if you don't need to think about your suspension, it's probably doing a good job. Yeah, I think that's it. So that was my review of the Manitou Mezzer Pro Forks, and yeah, they're pretty good. So thanks for watching.